so we're good.
Hey everybody, welcome to STRonomics. I'm Bill Faeth. This is Kenny Bedwell. Today we're going to be talking about the top 3 metrics that you should be tracking on a monthly basis to stay ahead of your competition. So Kenny, what if you have like 11 properties in one market? Are you tracking these metrics against yourself? I just typed the title in and I'm thinking about that. I've got 11 properties now in Gulf Shores and I'm a competitor because I own and everybody else individually owns, co-hosting. So let's get at it.
I mean, some of it's kind of natural. Like, probably the biggest one, metric is what is the difference, the percentage difference in your pricing from yourself and your nearest competitors. So what I mean by that is, I recently found that, so I use Price Labs, and I found that I was priced 20% higher than my competitors in the month of February. And I realized that, hey, I didn't have any bookings, or, I was looking at booking lead time, which is also another metric I track. And that's probably the second one that I'll reference in a second. But we've talked about that one before, so we don't have to spend too much time on booking lead time, but we'll talk about it and why it's important for this particular topic. However, I realized that, man, my booking lead time, so how far out guests were booking, it's 21 days for this particular property on average for the bed count. And
this is going to be a 3-minute podcast, right? You're a minute and a half, and we're through 1 and 2.
I'm already kind of talking about 2, but we're still talking about the percentage difference in pricing, because this is probably the biggest one that really people need to understand. Because the first thing to do is I'm not getting any bookings. What's going on? We might go to Rank Breeze, we might go check out other things, but in actuality, we really need to identify what is the difference between our property and pricing and what the competitors are pricing at, and not just so you got to be careful when I say competitors. What do I mean by that? I mean comparable properties that are in the location, have similar quality. So, if your property is modern or updated, new construction, so on, and then finally have similar amenities, because those are true comparable properties. Obviously, the bed count's important. Bath count can be important as well, and accommodates the number of guests the property can accommodate is also important.
Eric Carrico will tell you that's the most important.
Bathroom, he's not wrong. The data does support increasing bathrooms can definitely impact revenue, and it's usually around $10,000 on average across markets. So, and guys, just so you know, I am putting together for our listeners, for anybody who cares. I haven't figured out a way to publish this probably yet, but by the time you hear this podcast, I'll have something out where you can actually get a data set from me about how to see the impact of amenities in your market and how they impact revenue.
So is that like a PDF or something? Or is it, you don't know yet?
To be determined. Well,
okay.
I would like to get the data sets in people's hands so they can play around with the data and clean it up themselves and do stuff with it. But it gets very spreadsheet oriented. So right. I'm thinking about doing, simplified version PDF, here's just a report. And then
that's a big deal.
Yes.
Big deal. I know you and I have been talking about it. And so if it's not in the show notes, just FYI, for those of you that are listening or watching, you see my IG, Kenny's IG, just hit us up and one of us will make sure that you can get access to that document, spreadsheet, website, whatever format it's going to come
whatever in. Kenny gets together for people. Yeah. So, I mean, just because I don't know, I'm a lot of people are asking. I mean, this is probably the number one thing that I get is not necessarily purchasing or identifying markets, but amenities. What can I add that makes me stand out? And maybe this is a separate.
That's not number one. But number one is, when are Bill and Kenny going to broadcast live in Logan, Ohio? That's number.
There we go. Logonomics.
There's probably going to be people at the conference in a couple of weeks are going to have Logan, Ohio signs. We love Logan, Ohio out in the crowd.
Yeah, I know, right? Logan haters.
Exactly. We should get T-shirts that say Logan haters on it. # Logan haters.
We should.
I'm going to have Chris make that. We'll wear it on stage together.
It's not a logo for him to make. Anyway, that's great. So going back, so really identifying the true comparable properties, comparable competitors, doing the enemy method after the fact that you've already purchased, Avery Carl's enemy method, but doing it after you purchase your property and seeing what's out there, because you might be surprised. There's a ton of new properties. I was shocked. In fact, when I was looking in February at my competitors, I was shocked to see how many true competitors I had and how many people had upped their game to compete with me. And so I looked at their pricing and I was 20% higher than them. Now, I mentioned on a previous podcast that I have this particular property. I have almost 300 reviews, and so it's almost my set it and forget it because I have so many reviews and I have a really decently high rating for my market, and so I never really have to worry about ranking. However, I just wasn't getting the bookings, and I was highly ranked. I was in the top 3, out of like 300 properties. So I'm like, okay, so what is the problem? And I look at it and it's my pricing. I'm 20% higher than my nearest competitor who has got similar quality, similar location, similar amenities, A to Z everything. So at that point, guests don't care about my reviews. They're looking at the budget here. And they're saying, wow, this house is considerably higher, even though it's pretty similar to everything else we're seeing. And so I'm not going to book there. So
20% significant.
Yes. Yes, it was. So I had to make a change. So I like to be about 5% higher than everybody else because one, that gives me a better quality of guests. Psychologically, people who are booking, who pay towards, the more expensive places, they assume that places that are more expensive are better quality, even though it could be the exact same. And,
say that one more time.
if I can remember now.
Just the last part.
So
places that are more expensive are of better quality.
Correct. That's the assumption.
That is a perception.
Yes.
And there's a perception with round numbers, right? And that's a whole pricing strategy that people don't talk about in this industry, right? So there's a big takeaway I just heard from Kenny, 5% delta. You get to 10, you get to 15, you get to 20, you're priced too high. And that's one thing I don't like about the dynamic pricing tools is they're never rounded numbers. So for like my very exclusive properties, I'll go in and a lot of times manual price to take, $1,379 and just move it to $1,400. Because that's luxury. I mean, that's what Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Four Seasons, Mandarin, that's what they do. And if you're attracting that buyer, that's just a small little bit of a pricing strategy. If you're not trying to go after that buyer, don't do it.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So, and I mean, I'm finding that I'm having to manually change my prices to fluctuate because a lot of these pricing tools, and if anyone who's listening who's a pricing, guru in terms of works for one of these places, please reach out. I'd love to have a good conversation. But what I'm finding is
I sent this morning.
They are, there you go. They are using the trailing 12 to determine prices for the future. And you just can't really do that, especially with the amount of competition in certain markets.
Well, what did you say on the last podcast, Kenny, that like 72% increase in volume of STRs year over year?
On the OTAs, that's correct. Yeah. So, now with that being said, is it a true 72% increase? No, I don't believe so. I think that just more and more people, more and more property management companies are putting their properties on Airbnb and VRBO. However, I mean, that's still alarming. I mean, there's definitely more than, it could be 40% or 50%.
Here's what that number blows my mind. But I think what's even going to be way more interesting is in 2024, I want to see how that has to drop in 2023, and I want to know how significantly that's going to drop.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Well, hopefully we're here and I can provide that information. So, yeah.
All right, so why is booking lead time so important, Kenny?
Okay, yeah. So we're on to booking lead time. So booking lead time, for me I call it a present day metric. So it's one of the only metrics that I don't necessarily care about the historics on. I want to know today because it represents demand today. So how far out are guests booking from today? So, there's an average. For example, in my market, it's only 3 weeks, but that's only during the season. When we get into it's already March, but we get into April and May, the booking lead time starts to drastically increase because people are planning their summer plans to come to Niagara Falls. I'm talking about Buffalo here, but
People go
you
there.
know, in other particular markets. However, in markets, say like the Smokies or Gulf Shores, the booking lead time is like 40 to 50 days on average. It could
Are
be
you
higher.
just, how do you track that? Are you just using the Airbnb booking lead time, or do you use another tool to track booking lead time? That's not the behind the scenes STR insights data.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I does Airbnb provide a lead time tracker?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know that. I
And the
don't.
insight at the very bottom of your app in the insights section, they do.
Their insights are just confusing.
I I don't disagree.
Yeah, they're like I saw somebody post about that. They're like, I love like that, I can see this now, and I'm like, I don't even get it, and I love data, so I'm like,
So
good for
you're
you.
right, Kenny,
So
about booking lead time. So my booking lead time portfolio wide right now is 37.4 days, right? But I'm getting so many bookings in the last, like, since Christmas, and that are same week. This, if I pulled up my day, it's probably almost shrunk in half. It was probably closer to 70 days going, into the winter.
but you can
And I think
use
that'll,
that.
what's that?
No, I said the cool thing is you can use that and then look at your bed count. So yeah, I have access in STR Insights. But guys, I mean, Price Labs, it's $10 a month for their market dashboard. They have booking lead time by bedroom count. You can isolate the bedroom counts. You can use that, and that's perfectly fine. I think they call it like lead window or something like that, but it's essentially booking lead time.
Right.
So
So then why is that important?
well, I mean, obviously it tells you how far out, like, should you be booked, 30, 40, 50 days out, and
Right.
if you're booked 60 days out or 70 days out, that means your prices are too low and you need to adjust your pricing. And if you're not booked in that time period, then your prices you need to adjust your pricing, or you need to
And
make some changes to your listing.
and this is where, once again, not bullshitting yourself and being perfectly honest, looking at some of your historical data, even though
Yes.
really the last 2 years is not going to be relevant for 2023. But I'll tell you, ultra peak season for like beach properties and high demand locations like Marco Island during the winter, and Destin and Gulf Shores and stuff like that, you're going to sell out if you don't go crazy, or at least I believe I will sell out this summer. But I look at two opposite ends of the spectrums. With my super high demand property, I raise prices in the last 7 to 10 days if I have something available. And a property that's good but not super high demand, that may not sell out, may only operate in an 85%, 90% occupancy, I might decrease that 3%, 5% to stay in line with that competitor analysis, that Kenny said in number one, to look at that percentage difference. So, like, my biggest property, I didn't think would be booking right now, Kenny, but I'm like close to 30% higher than my competitors. So I'm taking advantage of those early bookers, and I will keep that pricing high all the way through. And, one of the things I think people don't understand on like their yearly revenue projections is, if you just got annihilated like we did in Gulf Shores, every property, it's like my biggest property, I did 357 last year, but I was doing like 23 to 29 in January and February. This year I did like 7 and 9 in January and February. So I've already got like a $40,000 negative delta year over year starting the year. There's no way that I'm going to hit 357 this year, right? So I think that's the other thing is, if you don't know your booking lead time, you don't have a pricing strategy, period. You have to understand how to leverage that, and you can't let the dynamic pricing tools just determine it for you. Like, Kenny, a lot of people don't even know how to go in and set the aggression level inside of Price Labs or beyond, or whatever that is, right? And that's really going to determine how that's going to fluctuate. So you need to have the intimate relationship with your dynamic pricing tool, and you need to be in that thing at least a couple of times a week doing some manual pricing as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, I significantly agree. I mean, I found that if I price I know that my market, the weekends are the hot commodity. Like, I've never ever, any of my properties, especially in the urban areas, have missed a particular weekend with a booking. They always get booked, even last minute. Um, However, knowing that though, I need to heavily price my weekends compared to my weekdays. And so I know which days during the week are, less attractive, especially during the winter time. So I'll greatly decrease the prices for those days. And the dynamic pricing tool kind of does that, but it's guys, it's not a human being. It's a model, it's an algorithm that you have to teach. And even if you teach it, it might forget it. So keep that in mind. It's not like quote unquote machine learning. It's just an algorithm. And so you have to tell it, look, like for me, I need to price my weekends a little bit higher or a lot higher in reality, like 25% more than the weekdays is kind of how I do it. And certain weekdays and other weekdays, I'll price a little bit more than others, So like my Tuesdays and Wednesdays are my least occupied days. If you were looking at a full year compared, which days of the week are the most occupied. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are the least occupied, so I price those the lowest, and then so that means I can still get them filled and help my occupancy and overall cash flow at the end of the month. So
that is some great advice. So you're taking in booking lead time, you're taking in occupancy by day, where a lot of people just look at overall occupancy rate or by the month, right? And that's the big takeaway I want everybody to understand is the more granular you can get in this type of analysis, the better equipped you're going to make on your decision-making processes. It's pretty simple.
Right.
Awesome.
I agree.
Great stuff, my friend. Number 3.
So I have a third one, and then there's actually two I have that
I'll just say 3 minutes.
I got 3 minutes. Okay. So, so the third one I have, and surprisingly, not a lot of people do this, is their P&L at the end of the month. I mean,
their what?
How much money their P&L?
I don't know what a P&L is. Can you explain that to me?
Profit and loss statement. So your profit, how much money did you net cash flow at the end of the month, and tracking that on a monthly basis and comparing. So it's kind of a two-part one here. So do your P&L, so track your profit and loss, your cash flow, and then comparing that to your projections that you made when you purchased the property.
And by the way, yours is due for the mastermind tomorrow.
That's very true. Yeah.
There's a reason that, like in our mastermind, that we require the benchmarks, which are somewhat pared down, of a P&L to be, it's a requirement to be updated by the 10th of every month. I've got to get mine in. I haven't done mine for last month. And it's because that we have to have, if you don't run a P&L, you don't know if you're profitable. You cannot manage a business out of a checking account. And I'll tell you, for probably the first 5 to 10 years I did it, and I had no clue what I was doing. And, you should have those benchmarks. I'll tell you, everybody should work for a car dealer at some point, be like a salesperson, and understand how car dealerships track how many units they're selling, what the profit is front and back, all of these things. And because it's a hardcore business, right? So if you're budgeting $10,000 in revenue this month, and I'll just use me. If I budgeted 23,000, let's say 25,000 for this, January and February, like what I did last year, and I only did 7 and 9, then I can see, okay, last year, those 2 months I did 50. This year I did 16, I'm $34,000, $36,000 behind, $34,000 behind after 2 months. So then every month I look at it, I use what's called tracking. I've got to make up that delta. So I might get a little bit more aggressive in trying to work on my optimization or my ranking, so I earn that opportunity to increase my pricing. But if you're not looking at that, you don't really know where the health of your business is.
Yeah. And you don't need to, and why that's relevant here to like beat your competition or track against your competition is there's a high chance your competition is not tracking that.
They don't know. There's no chance.
It was funny. I posted in my group. So the STR Data Host Facebook group, if you haven't joined it, come join it. It's got almost 700 people in it now. And I do like this monthly, like, hey, are you up? Is your portfolio of short-term rentals that you had year over year, is it up 10%, the revenue? Up 10% for the month, between 0 and 10, up or down, 0 to 10 or down 10% plus, year over year revenue for, each month. And, the first time I posted, I think only 15 people did it. And then the second time I did it, we had more people in the group, but there was only like 30 people. And I'm like, why are people not doing this? Are they just not interested in this? And someone commented, they're like, people just don't know how much money they're making. And I'm like, you're right. They don't really know how their portfolio, more or less a property, is doing month over month in their cash flow and how it relates to what their original projections were as well for that property.
It's the fundamental, the single reason that I started Build Short-Term Rental Wealth, because to try to eliminate the financial illiteracy in our industry. And don't take that as a knock on our industry, because Kenny's proving it right now. And literally when we get done, I'm going to post that. I'm going to take the exact same thing and post it in my group with 25,000 people. And I'll probably have the same 30 people that will come in. And you don't know, you can't run a successful business and scale and grow if you don't know your P&L, period. It's that simple. So work on your P&Ls, understand your lead time and that delta, that percentage difference in your pricing from your competitors. Those are the 3 tips today that you should be tracking from metrics against your competitors. Thanks for joining us on this episode of STRonomics. We'll see you guys next week.